The year was 1875. The heat was not just heat, it was a weight. It pressed down on the roof of the stagecoach, through the canvas flaps, and settled onto Lena Hart's shoulders. She tried to shift on the hard bench, but there was nowhere to go. Every jolt sent a fresh cloud of fine red dust up from the floorboards. It coated her tongue and stung her eyes. Outside, the Arizona territory stretched into an endless, shimmering mirage. This was not the green, orderly east she had left behind. This was a land of giants. Giant saguaros stood like silent, wounded sentinels, their arms raised to a sky that offered no mercy. The wind, when it came, brought no relief. It smelled of sulfur, dry scrub, and something else, something animal and smoky. It smelled like sweat. This was the West, she thought. It was not romantic. It was raw, and it was terribly, terribly alive. The town of Redemption appeared suddenly, a collection of tired wooden buildings crouched beside the taller, stark walls of Fort Redemption. The stagecoach groaned to a stop, its long journey finished. Lena gathered her things, her hands stiff. She carried a small valise, a heavy crate of books that the driver had cursed for 200 miles, and, tucked deep in her luggage, a small, well-oiled pistol that had belonged to her father, the doctor. She also clutched a letter of introduction, her key to a new life as the town's schoolteacher. She stepped down onto the dusty street, her black traveling dress already looking foolish and out of place. Her first impression of Redemption was one of tension. The town was a jagged line of people who did not belong together. Miners, their faces caked in grime, leaned against the saloon, watching her with flat eyes. Women in bright, cheap dresses laughed too loudly from an upstairs window. A few homesteaders, their faces burned dark by the sun, loaded supplies into a wagon, ignoring everyone. Soldiers from the fort moved in pairs, their blue uniforms a sharp contrast to the brown dust. And farther out, near the edge of the scrubland, she saw them, figures, just watching. Apache, she presumed. Their presence was felt more than seen, a silent warning on the edge of everything. Nobody met her gaze for long. It was a town, Lena realized, where everyone held their secrets close, like a gambler hiding his last coin. She was directed to the cantina run by a man named Miguel Alvarez. It was the only place serving food that did not also seem to be serving trouble. The room was dark and smelled of spilled whiskey, coffee, and frying meat. Miguel, a middle-aged man with sad eyes and a careful smile, brought her water. She sat in a corner, pretending to read, but listening. The talk was low, but she caught the words. Spirit Canyon. The name was spoken like a curse. Those Apache devils, a freighter said, wiping his mustache. They are sitting on land the Great Western Rail needs. Another man, a civilian scout, spat. Do not worry. Captain Reed is here now. He is preparing to solve the Apache problem for good. A final solution. Lena felt a chill, despite the stifling heat. Solution. It sounded so clean. She doubted anything in this land was clean. Far from the town, high on a sun-baked mesa, Kohana watched. His body was still, blending with the red rock he knelt upon. Below him, the metal glinted. Soldiers, and men with strange tripods. Surveyors, slicing his land with their eyes and their instruments. They were the vanguard of the Iron Snake, the railroad. He closed his eyes. The memory was always there, sharp as obsidian. The white flag, the promise of peace, and then the shots. The screams of women and children as they were slaughtered by men who had drunk whiskey and called it justice. He had been a scout for the army then. He had believed, for a moment, in their paper promises. He had learned. He opened his eyes. The surveyors were moving closer to the mouth of the canyon. Spirit Canyon, the place where the spirits of his ancestors slept. He would not let the Iron Snake pass. He would not let them cut the heart out of his world. Later, in the shadows of the canyon, he spoke with Raven Eye. She was old, her skin like a map of the land itself. She sat by a small, smokeless fire. The railroad men come again. Grandmother, Kohana said. His voice was quiet. She nodded, feeding a dry stick into the flames. The white man does not understand the land. He sees only what he can take. He does not see the spirit in the rock or the memory in the water. He wants to own it. We cannot own the breath of our grandfathers, Kohana stated. It was a simple truth. No, she agreed. We can only honor it. We can only protect it. She looked at him, her eyes clear and sharp. You are a warrior, Kohana. But this fight is not just about arrows. They want our soul. Do not let your anger make you like them. We do not fight for hate. We fight to be left alone. The next day, Lena presented herself at Fort Redemption to report her arrival to the commanding officer. A sergeant, a man named Tom Doyle with an honest face that looked tired of the sun, led her to the captain's office. When the captain turned from his map, Lena's breath caught in her throat. Helena Hart, he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly out of place. I had heard a teacher was coming. I did not realize it was you. Silas Reed. She had not seen him in 3 years, not since that awful parlor in Boston, when her family, desperate for status after her father's death, had tried to arrange a match. He was handsome, more so now in his tailored uniform, his authority sitting on him like a fine coat. Captain Reed, she said, forcing her voice to be steady. He smiled, a perfect, practiced smile. Welcome to Redemption. Lena, it is a harsh place for someone of your refinement. He took her hand, bowing slightly. His manners were impeccable, but his eyes were the same. They were not kind. They were possessive. They looked at her not as a person, but as something to be acquired. A fine horse, a new saber, a piece of property. A chill went straight down her spine. That night, Lena walked back from the small room she had rented above the general store. The air had cooled, and the sky was a deep, impossible velvet, spilling over with stars. For a moment, she felt a flicker of the freedom she had craved. She passed a dark alley between the assay office and the livery. Voices, kept low, made her pause. She recognized one instantly. Silas Reed. The payment from Great Western Rail is secure, Silas said. Another voice, colder and drier, replied. My employers want results, Captain, not excuses about savages. They will have their results, Silas said. His voice had lost its parlor smoothness. It was hard, like iron. I am moving the troops in 3 days. We will burn Spirit Canyon from one end to the other. We will find a few burned wagons. Blame it on an Apache raid. By the time the regulators from Washington get here, there will be nothing left but ash and a clear path for the railroad. Lena stood frozen in the shadow. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was not war. This was not justice. This was murder for profit. She realized then that the wildness of this land was not in its landscape. It was in the men who had come to conquer it. The West was not about freedom. It was a place where the law of the jungle ruled, and men like Silas Reed were the apex predators. She pulled her shawl tighter and hurried into the night. 2 days later, Silas Reed insisted on showing Lena the country. You are to be our schoolmistress, Lena, he said, his voice smooth as oiled leather. He stood at the door of her small room, his shadow filling the frame. It is my duty to ensure you understand the land you are in, the dangers, why the fort and my command are so necessary. She knew it was a lie. The memory of his voice in the alley, cold and greedy, was burned into her mind. But she could not refuse. To do so would be to show her hand, to admit she had heard, in this town, in this territory. She was a woman alone. She was property in his eyes, and she had no recourse. That is very thoughtful, Captain, she said, forcing a small, tight smile. They rode out an hour after dawn. The heat was already building. The patrol was small, just Silas, Lena, and 6 enlisted men. Sergeant Doyle rode near the front, his face set in professional lines, but his eyes scanned the ridges with a nervous energy. Lena was mounted on a cavalry horse, a tall animal that sensed her unease and sidestepped constantly. Silas, however, was the picture of confidence. He rode beside her, pointing out distant formations of rock naming them with proprietary flair. "That is Coyote Pass," he'd say. "And beyond that, the high mesas. Beautiful. Is it not deceptively so? This land hides its teeth." His charm made her skin crawl. He was performing for her, playing the part of the gallant protector, and she was forced to play the part of the grateful lady. They moved deeper into the red rock country, leaving the open desert behind. The trail narrowed. They were forced to ride single file through canyons that twisted and turned, the walls rising sheer on either side. The silence was heavy, broken only by the clink of bridles and the shod hoofs on stone. "Captain," Sergeant Doyle said, his voice quiet. He had reined in, pointing to the ground. "Tracks. Unshod ponies. 3 of them. Looks like fresh." Silas glanced down, annoyed at the interruption. "Scouts. They are watching us. Let them. It is good for them to see the flag." But the air had changed. The soldiers' shoulders were tighter. They rode with their hands closer to their rifles. Lena's heart began a slow, heavy beat against her ribs. A half-mile farther, a sharp thwack echoed through the canyon. An arrow, fletched with hawk feathers, embedded itself deep in a tall saguaro just ahead of the column. It was not aimed at them. It was a warning. "Impudent," Silas spat. He pulled his revolver. "The next one who shows his face will regret it." "Sir," Doyle said, "that is a warning. Maybe we should do nothing." "Sergeant," Silas snapped, "we do not turn back for one arrow. We are the United States Cavalry." The shot came without warning. It was not the twang of a bow, but the deep crack of a rifle. Dust kicked up 10 feet from Silas's horse. "Ambush," Silas roared. Apache figures erupted from the rocks above them, screaming. They were grotesque, smeared with crude paint, wearing dusty feathers. They opened fire, and the narrow canyon became a trap. "Fire at will," Silas bellowed, his face a mask of rage. "Give them hell, boys." The soldiers, panicked and needing no encouragement, dismounted and began firing wildly at the figures on the rocks. Bullets screamed, ricocheting off the canyon walls. The air turned to poison, thick with sulfur and screaming. Lena's horse reared, terrified by the noise. She pulled on the reins, but the animal was beyond her control. It spun, slamming her against the canyon wall, and she was thrown. She landed hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, her vision blurring. Through the chaos, she saw one of the attackers leap down from a low ledge. He was running toward her, a knife in his hand. He was screaming, but the sound was wrong. And beneath the paint, his face, he was white. "Got the woman," he yelled, his voice thick with a Missouri accent. He grabbed the front of her dress, hauling her up. "Get a pretty ransom for this one," Lena tried to scream, but her lungs had no air. She saw the man's grime-cracked face, his yellow teeth, and then a sound, different from rifle fire. A whisper, followed by a solid, wet thunk. The outlaw's eyes went wide. He looked down. An arrow, dark and sleek, was buried in his shoulder. He howled, a true sound of pain this time, and let her go. Lena fell to her knees. She looked up, past the falling outlaw, to the ridge above. A man stood there, outlined against the brilliant blue sky. He was still as the rock he stood on. He was Apache. He wore no paint, only buckskin leggings and a simple band around his head. He held a bow. He did not move. He just watched. Then more figures appeared at his side. True Apache. They moved like water flowing over rock, descending into the canyon. They engaged the white outlaws, and the battle shifted. It was no longer an ambush. It was a cleaning. The Apache warriors fought with knives and hatchets, their movements precise and deadly, while the outlaws were clumsy and loud. "More of them," Silas shouted, his face purple. He had not recognized the attackers as white. To him, any resistance was Apache. "Wipe them all out, all of them." The soldiers, trapped in their commander's rage, obeyed. They turned their carbines on the new arrivals. The battle became a horrifying 3-sided melee. The soldiers fired at everyone. The outlaws, caught in the middle, fired at both the soldiers and the Apache. Lena scrambled on her hands and knees, desperate for cover. A bullet sang past her ear, so close she felt its heat. It chipped the rock beside her head, and a splinter of stone cut her cheek. She tasted blood and dust. She collapsed behind a large sandstone boulder, gasping, her whole body shaking. She pressed herself flat against the warm stone, and she realized she was not alone. A child, a small boy no older than 6, was huddled in the crevice. He was Apache. He must have been hiding there with his mother, Lena thought, remembering a flash of movement she had seen just before the shooting. A native woman, caught in the soldier's first volley. The boy was frozen, his eyes wide and black with a terror so deep it had no sound. Before Lena could move, a shadow fell over her. A hand, hard and brown, clamped onto her arm. She opened her mouth to scream. It was the man from the ridge, Kohana. He had dropped silently from the rocks above. He pulled her deeper into the shadow of the boulder, tight against the stone. He was breathing hard, but his body was steady. He put one finger to his lips. It was an unmistakable command. Silence. The battle raged just feet away, and in that small, protected space, they stared at each other. This was the first time Lena had ever been this close to an Apache warrior. This was the devil of Spirit Canyon. The savage Silas wanted to burn from the earth. He was nothing like the whispers. His face was hard. Yes, a roadmap of scars and sun, but his eyes, they were not filled with bloodlust. They were exhausted. They were intelligent, and as they took in the scene, they were filled with a profound, weary anger. He was utterly calm in the center of the storm he inhabited. Kohana looked at her, the white woman, not a soldier. Her dress was torn, her face bleeding. Her hands were shaking, but they were not shaking just for herself. He saw her left arm, even as she trembled, crooked protectively around the small Apache boy behind her. She was shielding him with her own body. This he had not expected. He saw her fear, but he also saw that she had not pushed the child away. The moment was shattered. The gunfire was changing. The outlaws were routed, fleeing down the canyon. The soldiers were advancing, their fire now concentrated entirely on Kohana's men. Silas, moving forward, caught the flash of movement behind the rock. He saw the buckskin and the pale color of Lena's dress. "The savage has her," he bellowed, raising his pistol. "He has taken Miss Hart. He is kidnapping her after them fire." Bullets hammered the rock where they hid. Spang-clang chips of stone flew like shrapnel. Kohana looked at Lena. The soldiers were coming. He could not fight them all, and he could not leave her. She was now a witness to everything. He knew what men like Silas did to witnesses. He made his choice. He grabbed her arm. Not gently this time. He hauled her to her feet. "Come," he said. His voice was low, rough, the first word she had ever heard him speak. He did not wait for an answer. He pulled her, half dragging, half lifting, toward a narrow fissure in the canyon wall she had not seen. It was the only way out. The child, seeing his chance, scrambled after them like a shadow. Lena stumbled, her legs refusing to obey. She was being pulled away from the blue-coated soldiers who were supposed to be her protectors, by a man she had been taught to fear as a monster. "No," she tried to say, but the gunfire drowned her out. He pushed her into the darkness of the crevice. Kohana's last glimpse was of Silas Reed, his face contorted in triumph, already crafting the lie that would let him burn the canyon. Bullets struck the entrance as they scrambled into the rock. Lena Hart, the new schoolteacher from the east, was no longer a visitor. She was a prisoner. Dragged into the heart of the land her people were trying to destroy. The conflict had begun. The fissure in the rock was a tight, dark womb. Kohana did not release her. He pulled Lena through the passage, his grip like iron on her arm. The rough stone tore at her dress and scraped her palms as she stumbled in the near blackness. The sound of the battle, the screams and the constant crack of the rifles, faded behind them, muffled by tons of solid rock. The air grew close and cold. She thought she would faint from the lack of air, from the terror. Just when she felt her lungs would burst, they emerged into light. Lena stopped, gasping. Kohana let go of her arm, and she staggered. They were not just in another canyon. They were in a place that should not exist. It was immense. The walls of Spirit Canyon rose thousands of feet, sheer cliffs of red and orange sandstone. So tall they seemed to hold up the sky. But unlike the dry, dead canyons outside, this place was alive. A thin ribbon of water, impossibly clear, ran through the center of the canyon floor, feeding stands of cottonwood trees whose leaves shimmered a bright, shocking green against the red stone. She could hear the sound of a distant waterfall, a small herd of wild horses, coats shining in the slivers of sunlight, lifted their heads to watch them before vanishing into the trees. The walls of the canyon were marked with ancient symbols, pecked into the rock face high above them. This was not a fortress. It was a cathedral. Kohana gave her no time to admire it. He shoved her forward, toward a cluster of shelters hidden under the overhang of a massive cliff. They were wickiups, domed structures of brush and hide, smoke rising in thin, lazy curls from their centers. As they approached, the village came alive. Women stopped their work, grinding corn or stretching hides. Old men rose slowly. Children vanished. Their faces were not curious. They were hostile. Kohana walked straight through the center of the village, pushing Lena before him. The small boy, Nantan, who had followed them, immediately ran to an older woman who clutched him to her chest, weeping and glaring at Lena. They were brought before a small group of elders sitting by a smokeless fire. One of them, a woman whose face was a beautiful and terrible map of wrinkles, watched Lena with eyes that seemed to see right through her skin. This, Lena knew, must be Raven Eye, a young warrior, perhaps 19 or 20, leaped to his feet as they approached. His face was twisted in rage. He pointed at Lena. "Why?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Why do you bring this poison here? Kohana, she is one of them. I saw the smoke from the battle. She brings the soldiers to our home." "Be silent, Taza," Kohana said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the young man's anger. "She did not bring them. They brought her." One of the old men spoke, his voice dry. "She is a white woman. The soldiers will follow her. She is in trouble. Take her back to the edge of the canyon. Leave her for the captain to find. He wants her. This is not our fight." A murmur of agreement went through the small crowd. Lena's heart hammered. They were going to feed her to Silas. Kohana stepped forward, placing himself between Lena and the council. "No," he said. "This woman did not act like the others." He gestured to the boy. "Nantan. I saw her in the rocks. The bullets were flying. She used her body to shield the boy. She did not push him away. She is not a soldier. She is white." Taza spat. "That is all that matters. And," Kohana continued, ignoring him, "she may know something. The captain did not come to that canyon by accident. This was a plan. She was with him. She may know what it is." Lena looked at the faces. They were hard, closed. They saw her color, her dress, her fear, and they saw an enemy. Then the old woman, Raven Eye, spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it commanded the silence. "Step closer, white girl." Lena, shaking, took 2 steps. Raven Eye's gaze was unsettling. It was not angry, it was heavy, like the land itself. The old woman's eyes dropped from Lena's face to her throat. "The stone," Raven Eye said, pointing a thin finger. "Where did you get it?" Lena's hand flew to her neck, to the small, smooth piece of turquoise she always wore on a leather thong. It was the only thing of her father's she had kept, besides the pistol. It was carved with a symbol, a spiral that crossed a straight line. "It was my father's," Lena whispered, her voice hoarse. "He was a doctor. He served in the army. Years ago, he gave it to me before he died." A profound silence fell over the group. Raven Eye looked at Kohana, and then at the other elders. A look of disbelief passed between them. Raven Eye turned back to Lena. "Your father. He was the doctor with sad eyes, the one who did not wear the blue coat." I do not know," Lena stammered. "He was a surgeon. 10 winters ago, Raven Eye said, her voice chanting a memory. "The coughing sickness came. It took our children. The army medicine man would not help. He said it was God's will. But another man came, a white doctor. He came alone. He brought his own medicine. He sat with our children for many nights. He did not sleep. He saved many. Raven Eye looked at the furious young warrior. He saved you. Taza, you were dying. And he saved Kohana, who was just a boy. She looked back at Lena. When he left, the council gave him that stone. It means, he who walks between worlds. It is a mark of honor. Our people owe your father a life debt. Lena stared at the old woman. Her mind reeled. Her father, her quiet, scholarly father, who read poetry and smelled of carbolic soap. She knew he had served in the West, but he had never spoken of it. He had returned to Boston a silent, haunted man. She had always assumed he was haunted by the war between the states. She had never, not once, imagined this. He had not just known the Apache, he had saved them. He had stood against the army. Her entire world tilted on its axis. The neat lines she had drawn between her people and the savages blurred and broke apart. The knowledge gave her a desperate, sudden courage. She found her voice. He never told me, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. But if you owe him a debt, then listen to me. You are all in greater danger than you know. The man who leads the soldiers, Captain Reed, is the one you must fear. She looked at Kohana. You were right. It was a plan. I heard him 2 nights ago in town. He is working for the railroad, the Great Western Rail. The name of the railroad caused another stir. He is being paid to clear this land, Lena said, the words tumbling out. He plans to burn Spirit Canyon. He said he would find a way to blame it on an Apache raid, the battle today. Those men who attacked us, they were not Apache. They were white men, outlaws, painted to look like Apache. Captain Reed hired them to start the fight. He used me. He used all of us. He is going to use my kidnapping as the excuse to bring his whole army here. The council was stunned. The revelation was too much. Taza exploded. A trick, he roared. He drew a long knife from his belt. It is a white woman's lie. She twists the truth to save her own skin. Her father saved my life. Yes, but she rides with the men who kill us now. Kill her. Let us cut the snake's head off before it bites. He lunged toward Lena. Kohana moved faster than she could have believed possible. He did not draw a weapon. He simply stepped in front of Taza, blocking him. He grabbed the young man's wrist, and the knife clattered to the stones. Kohana's voice was low and deadly. She speaks the truth. Taza froze, shocked. I saw them, Kohana said, his eyes on the council. The dead attackers. They were white men, painted poorly. I saw their boots. She is telling the truth. He turned to Taza, his voice softening slightly. Your anger is a shield. Little cousin, but it makes you blind. This is not the enemy. This is a map to the enemy. Kohana looked at the elders. She is the daughter of the doctor. The debt is real. She was protected by me in the battle. I will vouch for her. He looked at Lena, and his gaze was hard. There was no kindness in it, only a cold assessment. She will stay. For 3 days. We will see if the army moves as she says. I put my honor on this. If she is a spy, if she has lied, I will be the one to send her to her father. The council was silent, but Raven Eye nodded slowly. The decision was made. Taza, choking on his rage, retrieved his knife and stalked away. Lena was left standing by the fire, her legs weak. She was alive. She was a prisoner, but she was alive. She looked at the faces around her. They were not friends. They were people she had been taught to hate, and they had every reason to hate her. But she thought of Silas Reed's cold eyes. She thought of his plan to burn this beautiful, hidden place. She looked at the children now peeking out from behind the wickiups. If she stayed silent, they would all die. If she helped these people, she would be a traitor to her own. She realized, with a sickening lurch, that she already was. She had chosen. She would stay. She would help. She had to. The days in Spirit Canyon settled into a hard, strange rhythm. Lena was a ghost among the Apache. She was not a slave, but she was not free. She was watched every moment. She was given a small space in a wickiup shared by an older woman whose son had been killed by soldiers. The woman, whose name was She Who Remembers, did not speak to her, which Lena found was better than the open hostility she received from Taza and the other young warriors. She had to learn to live. Her Eastern traveling dress was a torn, sweat-stained mockery in this place. After 2 days, the older woman, without looking at her, tossed a simple buckskin dress and moccasins at her feet. It was a practical gesture, not a kind one. Lena changed, swallowing her pride. The leather was soft against her skin, and for the first time she felt as if she was not fighting the land itself. She learned that life here was work, constant, back-breaking work. She helped the women grind corn on a flat stone metate, pushing a smaller stone back and forth until her shoulders screamed in protest. She learned to bank a fire so that it gave off heat with almost no smoke. She learned that walking was an art. The Apache moved like shadows, placing their feet with intention, reading the sand and stone as she might read a novel. She learned that a broken twig, a displaced pebble, a single hawk feather left on a trail, all meant something. They were a language she was deaf to. She spent time with Raven Eye. The old woman did not try to teach her. She simply allowed Lena to sit and observe. Raven Eye would sit for hours, weaving intricate baskets from yucca fibers, her fingers moving with a speed that belied her age. Sometimes she would speak, her voice dry as the breeze. She showed Lena how to find water not by digging, but by watching the flight of bees. At night, she pointed to the stars, naming the patterns in her own tongue. She showed Lena how the sky was a clock and a map. "The wind," Raven Eye said one evening, her eyes closed. "It is not just air. It is the breath of the world. It carries news. Listen, it tells you when the rain is far away, and when the soldiers are close." Kohana was her shadow. He was tasked with guarding her, his honor staked on her presence. He watched her constantly, his face impassive, his presence a heavy weight. He said little, and she was grateful for the silence. It was better than the false politeness of Silas Reed. One afternoon, he found her struggling to braid her hair, her eastern fingers clumsy with the thick strands. He watched her for a moment, then came forward. He took the leather ties from her hand. She flinched, but he was not rough. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he expertly wove her hair into 2 tight, practical braids that kept it out of her face. His touch was brief, impersonal, and it sent a shock through her. He was also tasked with her education. "You cannot stay here if you are useless," he said flatly one morning. He took her to the small herd of ponies. "You will learn to ride." "I know how to ride," she protested, thinking of the tall cavalry horse. "No," he said. "You know how to sit on a saddle? You do not know how to ride?" He gestured to a small, wiry mare. There was no saddle, only a blanket. "Get on." She tried. She fell off. Twice. He watched without expression, his arms crossed. "You think too much. You try to command the horse. You must feel. You must become part of the horse. Stop being a stone." He showed her how to grip with her legs, how to find the pony's center of balance. He pushed her, hard, until she stopped thinking and just clung, moving with the animal. By the end of the day, she was bruised and exhausted, but she had managed a short gallop across the canyon floor. She, in turn, found a way to bridge the silence. She had saved one book from her destroyed luggage, a child's primer. One evening, she saw Kohana studying a crumpled piece of paper. It was a military dispatch, lost in the battle. He could read the big letters, danger and army. But the looping script puzzled him. She sat, keeping her distance. "That word is ammunition," she said quietly. He looked up, his eyes sharp with suspicion. "It means bullets," she explained. "And this," she pointed, "is infantry. It means foot soldiers." He was proud, but he was not foolish. He knew the white man's power was not just in his guns. It was in his paper, his talking leaves. She took a charred stick from the fire and drew letters in the clean dust. "A, B, C. I am a teacher," she said. He watched, His gaze was intense. "Teach me," he commanded. And so they began a strange, silent trade. In the light of the sun, he taught her how to ride like the wind and how to listen to the stones. In the quiet of the evening, by the light of a small fire, she taught him how to read the language of his enemies. A deep conflict grew in Lena. She watched the Apache. She saw their laughter. She saw the way the children were cherished, running free, held by any adult, not just their parents. She saw the deep unspoken bond of family that held them all together. It was a freedom she had never known in Boston, where every action, every word, was governed by rules and suffocating appearances. She found herself breathing deeper, but she was still a prisoner. She missed her old life. She missed the simple luxury of soap, the taste of coffee, the safety of a locked door. She had come west to be independent, to build a small, respectable life. Now she was living among savages, her reputation destroyed, her future a blank, terrifying wall. She was trapped between the world she had lost and a world that would never truly accept her. On the third day, the day her probation was to end, Kohana told her they were riding out. "Scouts report dust," he said. "Soldier dust. We are going to see." They rode hard for 2 hours, climbing a steep, narrow trail to the high rim of the canyon. From that high pass, they could see for 50 miles. The open desert lay below them like a pale, sun-baked map. He was right. A long, thin column of dust, miles long, moved steadily toward the mountains. Silas was not waiting. He was coming. As they watched, the sky to the west changed. The sharp blue faded to a sickly yellow, then a dark, churning brown. A wall of wind and sand, 1,000 feet high, was racing across the desert, moving faster than any horse. "Bad," Kohana said. It was the first time she had heard a hint of alarm in his voice. "We must find cover, now." He grabbed her reins and pulled her horse after his. The wind hit them like a physical blow. It screamed. The world vanished. The air filled with sand so thick she could not see Kohana, who was only 10 feet ahead. The sand stung her skin, forced its way into her eyes, her nose, her mouth. Her pony stumbled, whinnying in terror. Kohana was suddenly there, emerging from the brown fog. He was off his horse. He grabbed her, pulling her from the saddle. "This way!" he yelled, his voice torn away by the wind. He half-dragged her to a sheer cliff face, to a crack in the rock, a shallow cave no bigger than a closet. They tumbled inside, gasping. Kohana pulled their horses close to the opening, forcing them to stand as a living barrier against the worst of the storm. The world outside ceased to exist. It was only noise, a deafening, constant shriek that sounded like 1,000 women screaming. They were trapped. Lena slid to the floor of the cave, her body shaking from the wind and the fear. Kohana, too, hunkered down. They huddled in the back of the small space. It was dark, and the air was thick with stinging dust. Hours passed. The storm did not relent. The temperature dropped, as it always did in the desert when the sun was gone. Lena began to shiver, her thin buckskin dress offering little warmth. Kohana watched her for a long moment. He was still, a shadow against the roaring brown mouth of the cave. He untied the rolled hide from his pony. It was a heavy buffalo robe. He unrolled it and, without a word, draped it around her shoulders. Pulling it tight, she huddled into its warmth. It smelled of him, smoke, horse, and the dry, clean scent of the high desert. They sat so close their shoulders touched, their legs brushed. The forced proximity was an agony of awareness. Lena could feel the heat radiating from his body. She could hear his quiet, steady breathing, a calm anchor in the center of the howling chaos, to fill the terrible, intimate silence. She spoke. "I am so cold." He passed her his water skin. "Drink." The water was warm and tasted of leather. "My father," she said, her voice muffled by the robe. The words pulled from her. "He was a good man. He loved books. I do not understand why he never told me about this place, about his life here." Kohana was silent for a long time. The wind howled. a high, thin sound. Perhaps he was ashamed, he said at last. Ashamed. Ashamed of his own people. Ashamed of what he saw. Sometimes it is easier to be silent than to tell a truth that no one will believe. Lena pulled the robe tighter, the heavy fur a comfort. I'm afraid of Captain Reed, she whispered. My family, they wanted me to marry him. Back in Boston, I refused. I ran away. I came here to be free of men like him. And I ran right into his trap. Kohana looked at her. In the dim, dusty light, she could just see the hard line of his jaw. He is a man who takes... He thinks he can own the land. He thinks he can own you. He is a sickness. He shifted, turning to look into the storm. I was a scout for the army, like your father. I thought I could walk between worlds. I was wrong. His voice was flat. Dead. Devoid of all emotion. I was at a camp on the Gila River. We had a treaty. The people were given papers. They flew a white flag over the camp, a sign of peace. He paused, and the silence in the cave was louder than the storm. The soldiers came at dawn. They were drunk. They were not soldiers. They were butchers. They shot everyone. The women, the children, as they ran from the river. I watched. I wore the blue coat. I watched them kill my aunt, my cousin. I did nothing. He turned his gaze back to her. His eyes were not just exhausted. They were black holes, burned out by a fire she could not imagine. I left the coat that day. I came here. I will not watch my people die again. There is no between. There is only this and that. In that dark, howling cave, Lena finally understood. The wall between them. The wall of savage and civilized, of prisoner and guard. It crumbled. It was dust, just like the storm outside. He was not a monster. He was a man who had seen the monsters. They were the same, both of them. Kohana and Lena were refugees. Both were running from the same system of greed and violence, embodied by men like Silas Reed. She did not know what to say. She only knew that the shivering had stopped. She looked at his face, the scar on his cheekbone, the line of his mouth. She felt an awareness that had nothing to do with fear. It was a pull, sharp and sudden, a feeling of recognition. She saw the strength he held back, the grief he carried. He was watching her, too. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. The air in the cave was suddenly too thin. It was charged with the wind, and with something else, something that sparked between them, hot and bright. He leaned in, just a fraction. She saw his eyes darken. Then he pulled back. He turned his face to the storm again, breaking the contact. The code of his honor, his duty as her guard, was stronger. He would not touch her. She was a white woman, the daughter of the doctor he owed his life to, and she was in his care. He would not be the man who takes. The storm broke near dawn. The wind dropped, leaving an eerie, absolute silence. The world outside was scoured clean, remade in shades of red and brown. They rode back to Spirit Canyon in silence, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. The attraction, now that it had been acknowledged, throbbed between them, a dangerous living thing. When they returned to the village, it was in a state of quiet panic. The scouts Kohana had sent in another direction had returned. The news they carried confirmed what Lena and Kohana had seen. The army was not just coming. It was already at the mouth of the canyon, larger than they had expected. They were making a permanent camp, and they were unloading heavy canvas and long wooden poles. They were preparing for a siege, for what Silas had called an armed crackdown on hostiles. The lie was in motion. The time for hiding was over. Back at Fort Redemption, the lie took root. Captain Silas Reed filed his official report with the Territorial Command. He crafted a masterful narrative of a brutal, unprovoked attack. He described how his peaceful patrol, assigned to escort the new schoolmistress, was ambushed by a superior force of Apache warriors from Spirit Canyon. He painted a heroic picture of his men fighting back, only to have the savages, in a final act of barbarism, seize Miss Helena Hart as a hostage. They have taken a white woman, a civilian of good standing, he wrote, his pen scratching angrily on the paper. She is the daughter of a decorated army surgeon. This cannot stand. It is my professional opinion that the hostiles in Spirit Canyon have declared open war. I am formally requesting authorization to lead a full punitive expedition. We must rescue Miss Hart and eradicate this threat to the railroad and the safety of all citizens in this territory. His superiors, eager for any excuse to placate the Great Western Rail, telegraphed their approval within hours. Silas was granted a full company, including a mountain howitzer. He began preparations immediately, a grim satisfaction settling on his handsome features. But not everyone at the fort was convinced. Sergeant Tom Doyle oversaw the shoeing of horses, the hard rhythm of the hammer on the anvil matching the troubled beat of his thoughts. He remembered Dr. Hart, not as a decorated surgeon, but as a quiet, weary man who smelled of carbolic soap and poetry books. Dr. Hart had argued against the massacre of a Cheyenne camp years before, an argument that had stalled his career. He was a man of profound, unpopular conscience. Doyle had been in that canyon fight. He remembered the chaos. He remembered Silas Reed's eyes, not the eyes of a man surprised by an ambush, but the eyes of a man impatient for one. He remembered the attackers. They were sloppy. Their war cries had sounded forced, and one of them, when hit, had cursed in perfect guttural English. Reed's order to fire on all targets, including the real Apache who had appeared later, had been too fast, too total. Now, the story was that Lena Hart, the doctor's daughter, had been conveniently kidnapped by the very men Reed needed to destroy. It was too neat. It stank. Doyle began his own quiet investigation. He spoke to the trooper who had been on point. "Those tracks?" Doyle asked, keeping his voice casual. "The unshod ponies. You were sure?" The trooper hesitated, wiping sweat from his brow. "They were tracks, Sergeant. But now that you mention it, they were dug in deep, like a horse standing still for a long time, not a pony on the move, and all in one place, like they were waiting." Doyle's blood ran cold. He knew. He did not know how he knew, but he knew. This was a setup. In Spirit Canyon, Lena felt the same dread. The scouts reported the buildup of soldiers at the canyon mouth, the glint of the howitzer's brass barrel in the sun. They were not just camping. They were preparing for an invasion. "He is using me," she told Kohana, her voice tight with panic. "He will kill you all, and tell the world he did it to save me." "He will try," Kohana said, his hand resting on his bow. "We cannot let him," she insisted. "We have to tell someone." She thought of the sergeant, the man with the honest, tired face. "Sergeant Doyle. He knew my father. I saw his face at the fort. He did not look like the others. I think he can be trusted." "Trusting a soldier is trusting the wolf," Kohana said. "This time we must," she pleaded. She found a piece of charcoal from a cold fire and on the back of a tattered illustration from her ruined primer. She began to write. She wrote everything. She told him about the meeting in the alley, the Great Western Rail, the outlaws painted as Apache, and the lie of her kidnapping. She begged him, in the name of her father's memory, to stop Silas Reed. "How do we get this to him?" she asked. Kohana looked at the desperate, smudged note. "Miguel," he said. That night, Kohana slipped from the canyon. He moved not like a man, but like a change in the light, a shadow detaching itself from other shadows. He reached redemption as the town was settling, the saloon still loud, the fort silent and dark. He found Miguel Alvarez behind his cantina, dumping wash water. The man froze, his hand flying to the knife at his belt. "Be still." Kohana's voice came from the darkness. "Kohana," Miguel breathed, lowering his hand. "You are a dead man if you are seen. The fort is buzzing. They say you took the school teacher." "The captain lies," Kohana said, stepping into the dim light from the open door. He held out the small, folded paper. "This is from her. She is the daughter of the doctor, the one who saved my life, and yours." Miguel stared at the note, then at Kohana. He knew the debt. He remembered the burning fever, the snake bite, and Raven Eye's relentless healing. "She says the captain is the devil," Kohana said. "This note is for Sergeant Doyle." Only Doyle. Miguel looked around, his body tense. Every patrol, every drunk soldier, was now a threat. Silas Reed had spies everywhere. To be caught with this, it was not jail, it was a rope, but the debt was a debt of life. "He comes here for coffee in the morning," Miguel whispered. "Before the captain is awake, I will give it to him. I swear it on my mother's grave." Kohana nodded once. "My people thank you." He vanished back into the shadows. He returned to the canyon to find it in turmoil. Taza was gone. The hot-headed young warrior, sick of waiting, sick of listening to the whispers of a white woman, had taken matters into his own hands. "He went to strike the enemy," one of the other young men said, his eyes bright with a dangerous admiration. "He went to show them that we are not cowards." Raven Eye closed her eyes. "The foolish boy. He does not strike the enemy. He becomes the enemy's arrow." Taza returned just before dawn. He and his 2 followers were limping, but they were high on adrenaline and victory. They had found a small camp of railroad surveyors miles from the canyon. They had attacked. They had killed 2 men. Taza carried a new repeating rifle. "This," he proclaimed, holding the rifle high, "is how we fight. We take their weapons. We spill their blood." A few warriors cheered, but when Kohana stepped forward, the cheering died. His face was thunder. "What have you done?" Kohana's voice was a low growl. "I have done what you were afraid to do," Taza shot back. "I have killed the men who are stealing our land." "No," Kohana said, his voice shaking with a cold rage. "You have killed surveyors, men with paper, not guns, and you have murdered this woman's words." He pointed to Lena, who stood watching, her face pale. "What does it matter?" Taza spat. "It matters." Raven Eye's voice cut in. She stood, pointing a finger at Taza. "Because now, the white captain's lie is true. He told his soldiers we are murderers. You have just proven him right. You have not saved us, Little Hawk. You have doomed us." The canyon was split. The young, angry warriors sided with Taza. The older families, the mothers, gathered around Raven Eye, their faces etched with a new, terrible certainty. Lena felt a wave of nausea. Taza was wrong, but was he? His people had been murdered for generations. How could she ask him to wait for justice from a piece of paper? She felt the canyon walls pressing in. She had tried to build a bridge, but Taza had just burned it. She was trapped. She did not belong to the Apache, who now looked at her with renewed suspicion, and she could never return to the white world, where she was a pawn in Silas Reed's game. She belonged nowhere. In redemption. Sergeant Doyle walked into Miguel's cantina. The room was empty, save for the owner. "Sergeant," Miguel said, his hands shaking slightly as he poured the coffee. "You knew the doctor, the one who was here before?" Doyle looked up, surprised. "Dr. Hart? Yes, a long time ago. Why?" Miguel slid the cup across the bar. Tucked beneath it was the folded paper. "A debt," Miguel whispered. "For the doctor." Doyle's eyes darted to the paper, then to Miguel. He said nothing. He slid the note into his palm, left a coin, and walked out. He read it in the stables, the smell of hay and leather thick in the air. He read it once, then a second time. The charcoal blurred as his hands began to sweat. "He is paid by the railroad. He is using me." It was not a mutiny if the captain was a criminal. It was not treason if the war was a lie. He knew what he had to do. It was the end of his career. It was quite possibly the end of his life. But he thought of Dr. Hart and the girl who wrote with his same sense of desperate, angry honor. That afternoon, Sergeant Tom Doyle checked out a horse, his service revolver, and a full canteen. He told the stable hand he was checking the south perimeter. He rode out of the fort, and as soon as he was out of sight, he turned his horse. Not south, but east, toward the high, forbidden walls of Spirit Canyon. He was going to find the truth, or he was going to die trying. Tom Doyle rode with his back straight, the way 20 years in the cavalry had taught him. But inside, his stomach was a cold knot of fear. He was in open country, wearing the blue uniform, riding directly toward the one place on the map that every soldier was forbidden to go. He knew he was being watched. He could feel the eyes on his back, in the rocks, in the shimmer of the heat. He found the narrow trail, the one the Apache scouts used, and guided his horse into the fissure. The canyon walls rose around him, cutting off the sun. The air grew still. It happened fast. A sound, like a hawk's cry, from above. Then another. He was surrounded. They stepped from the rocks, materializing from the shadows. 3 warriors. Their faces were painted for war. The youngest one, Taza, stepped forward. His eyes were black with hate. "Blue coat," Taza said, his voice a snarl. "You are lost, and you are dead." An arrow was knocked. The sinew bowstring pulled tight. Doyle raised his hand, palm out. His heart was hammering, but he kept his voice steady. "I am not here to fight. I am here to find Lena Hart." The name gave Taza pause, but only for a second. "You lie. I am Sergeant Tom Doyle," he said, speaking loud and clear. "I knew her father, Dr. Hart. She sent me a letter." The arrow remained aimed at his heart. Taza did not care. This was a soldier. This was the enemy. "Stop!" Kohana stepped from the pass behind Doyle, blocking his only retreat. He held his rifle low. He had recognized the sergeant's face. He had seen this man at the fort. He was not like the others. But this was madness. "Why do you speak that name?" Kohana asked, his voice low. "I received her note," Doyle said, keeping his hands high. "From Miguel Alvarez. I read her words. I am not your enemy. Captain Reed is the enemy." The canyon was silent. Taza looked at Kohana, his face a mask of disbelief. A soldier, riding in alone, saying his captain was the enemy. It was a trick. It had to be a trick. Kohana stared at Doyle for a long, hard minute. He saw the sweat on the sergeant's brow. He saw the fear. But he also saw that the man's hand was not near his weapon. This soldier had ridden into the heart of his people's sacred land, alone. To say this, it was either the stupidest trap ever devised, or it was the truth. "Bring him," Kohana said. "But take his weapons." The meeting in the village was a storm. As Doyle was marched into the central clearing, the Apache gathered, their faces a mix of fury and shock. Taza was yelling, telling everyone it was a trick, that the soldier was a spy sent to count their numbers before the attack. Lena, hearing the commotion, ran from her wickiup. When she saw Doyle, alive, she burst through the crowd. "Sergeant!" she cried, a wave of relief so strong it made her dizzy. "Miss Hart," Doyle said, managing a small, tired smile. "I am glad to see you are unharmed. He is the one." Lena turned to the council, to Kohana and Raven Eye. "He is the man I wrote to. He knew my father. He is a good man. You must listen to him." "He wears the coat." "Lena," Taza shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Doyle. "He is one of them." "I am here," Doyle said, and Lena began to translate, her voice clear and urgent. "Because I believe Miss Hart, I believe Captain Reed is a traitor. He is a criminal who is using the United States Army to get rich." The accusation, spoken by a soldier, silenced Taza. The elders looked at each other. "It is worse than you think," Doyle continued, his gaze steady on Raven Eye. "Your raid," he said, giving Taza a hard look. "On the surveyors, it has given him exactly what he wanted. He has sent a report to the Territorial Command. They believe his lie. They believe Miss Hart was kidnapped, and that you are on the warpath." He took a deep breath. "He has been given full authorization to pacify this territory. He has a full company of cavalry, and he has a howitzer." Lena gasped. A howitzer? A mountain gun? In this narrow canyon, the walls would contain the blasts, turning the sacred place into a slaughterhouse. The council absorbed the news. The reality was grim. "We have 3 choices," Kohana said, his voice flat. He had known this was coming. An old man, his face scarred, spoke first. "We can surrender. We can walk to the reservation at San Carlos. The land is poisonous. The water is foul. We will starve, but our children will live." "Live," Taza exploded. "Live as beggars, as pets for the white man." Waiting for rotten meat. No, this is our land, given to us by the spirits. We will fight. We will die on this land. As warriors, Raven Eye looked at the furious young man. Her voice was soft, but it cut through his anger. Yes, Taza, you will die a glorious death, and so will he. She pointed to a small child playing in the dust. And she pointed to a young mother. And a howitzer does not care about your glory. It only cares about the end. You will be the last of us. That is not a victory, that is the end. The terrible silence returned. Every eye turned to Lena and the soldier. There must be another way, Lena said, her voice shaking. If we could just tell someone the truth. The railroad money, the outlaws he hired. The truth, ma'am, Doyle said, is just a story unless you have proof. Right now, Captain Reed has his proof. He has the kidnapped teacher and the murdered surveyors. His story is the one they believe. He leaned forward, dropping his voice. But what if we got better proof? What if we got his proof? Kohana's eyes narrowed. Speak. Reed is an arrogant man, Doyle said. He keeps records. I have seen his field desk. He has a lockbox. I will wager my life he has the letters from the Great Western Rail. He will have a ledger, a list of payments, and he will have the names of the outlaws he paid to stage that first attack. Lena understood immediately. His office, back at the fort. Yes, ma'am, Doyle said. If I could get my hands on those papers, if I could get them to the telegraph office, I can wire the commander at Fort Tucson. I can wire the Department of the Interior in Washington. I can name Silas Reed as a conspirator. I can name the railroad. They cannot ignore a telegram from a non-commissioned officer accusing his captain of murder, especially not if it risks a war with the railroad barons. It will force them to stop. It will force an investigation. It was a gasp of air, a tiny, impossible pinprick of light. Taza laughed, a bitter, harsh sound. A white man's trick. He wants us to believe in paper. In a talking wire, he will lead our warriors into a trap. Kohana did not look at Taza. He was staring at Tom Doyle. His entire life was a testament to the lies of the white man. The Gila River, the broken treaties, the poisoned rations. Every promise was a betrayal. And here was another man in a blue coat, asking him to believe in that same system, to trust a wire. Why? Kohana asked, his voice low. You are a soldier. This is treason. They will hang you. Doyle looked down at his own hands, the knuckles scarred from 20 years of service. I am a soldier, yes, but I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to one corrupt captain. I knew Dr. Hart. He was a man of conscience. I will not stand by and let his daughter be used as an excuse to massacre people so a rich man can lay a track. That is not what the army is supposed to be. Lena looked at Kohana. Her eyes were wet, but she did not weep. I trust him, she said, her voice quiet but fierce. He is like my father. He is telling the truth. Kohana held her gaze. He saw her faith, a desperate, fragile thing. He saw her trusting this soldier, and he realized that she was also trusting him, Kohana, to see the one true path. Her belief in Doyle was the only thing in the world that could have broken through his own armor of grief and hate. It was a fool's chance. But it was the only chance that was not death or surrender. We will do it, Kohana said. The council did not move. His word was final. He turned to his warriors. We will have two plans. Taza, you want to fight, you will prepare to fight, but you will fight my way. His voice hardened, taking on the tone of a war leader. Plan 1. You will take the warriors to the high passes. You will prepare rock slides. You will set traps. Every man with a rifle will be on the high ground. If the soldiers enter this canyon, we will make them bleed for every foot. We will not charge. We will not seek glory. We will seek to slow them. We will buy time. He then turned back to Lena and Doyle. Plan 2. The paper. The proof. We will go, Lena said. No, Kohana said. He pointed to Doyle. We'll go to the fort. He knows the patrols. He knows the office. I cannot get in alone, Doyle said. The fort is on high alert. You will not be alone, Kohana said. I will go. And you, he looked at Lena, will come with me. Both Doyle and Lena stared at him. What? Lena whispered. Think, Kohana said, his voice impatient. The town believes you are my captive. If you are seen with a soldier, you are a traitor and he is a deserter. They will shoot you both on sight, but if you are seen with me, it makes the lie real. I will be your captor. I will get you both into that fort. I will get the papers, and I will get you out." The plan was insane. It was suicide. That night, the village was a hive of frantic, quiet work. Warriors sharpened knives and piled rocks at the high passes. Lena packed a small bundle with water and dried jerky, her hands shaking. Kohana found her by the stream, away from the fires. He was dressed for the shadows, his face grim, his weapons secured so they made no sound. "You are ready?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "I am terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. When we are in the town, you do exactly as I say. You do not speak. You do not look at any man's face. You follow my shadow. Understand?" "Yes." They stood in the deep purple twilight, the stars beginning to burn overhead. The air was charged, not just with the coming battle, but with the memory of the storm cave, the knowledge of their attraction. The thing they had both pulled back from was a tangible presence between them. "Kohana," she said, her voice so low he had to lean in to hear it. "If this works, if we stop him, if Sergeant Doyle sends the telegram, what happens after?" He knew what she was asking. "Then you are free," he said. His voice was rough. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face in the dim light. "Free to do what? Go back to being a schoolteacher in Redemption, go back east." He looked at her for a long, heavy moment. He saw the girl who had arrived in a black dress, but she was gone. In her place was this woman, her hair in 2 braids, her face smudged with soot, her body strong from riding and grinding corn. "That is your choice," he said. "That is what this fight is for. Your right to choose, and my right to choose." He paused. "If you were free, Lena Hart, truly free, would you go back?" Lena opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She looked away, out of the canyon, toward the distant, flat horizon where the white man's world lay. Then she looked back at the towering red walls of Spirit Canyon, a fortress that had become her sanctuary, this place of her captivity. This place felt more like home than Boston ever had. I do not know," she whispered. The admission felt like a betrayal of both worlds. "I do not know who I am anymore." Kohana nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. "Then let us go and find out." He turned, a shadow among shadows, and she followed him out of the canyon. The journey back to Redemption was a waking nightmare. They moved only in the deepest shadows, Kohana and Lena in the lead, Doyle trailing them at a distance of 100 yards. The plan was fragile. Doyle, in his uniform, would walk the perimeter of the fort. Lena and Kohana would use the deep darkness near the stables, the part of the wall that faced the open, empty desert. The town was asleep, but Fort Redemption was a single, alert eye. The failure of the first patrol and the official kidnapping had put every sentry on edge. Doyle moved first. He walked his patrol route, nodding to the sentry at the main gate. He was calm, steady, a picture of military duty. He was headed toward the quartermaster's stores, near the captain's office. Kohana pressed Lena against the rough adobe wall of the livery. "Wait for his signal," he whispered. His breath was warm against her ear. "When you go, be a shadow." "What about you?" she whispered back. "I'm the cat. I watch." They heard Doyle's voice, calm and bored, engaging the corporal who guarded the administrative building. "Cold night for it, Corporal. Captain Reed expects the supply count for the morning." "I am just checking the manifests." The corporal grunted. "A lot of work. Sergeant, just for one savage." "Orders are orders," Doyle said, his voice flat. That was the signal. Kohana put his hands on Lena's waist. She was small, and the window to Silas's private office was narrow, set high off the ground. "Now," he commanded. He lifted her. She was shockingly light. He raised her as if she were a child, and she grabbed the rough wooden sill. She pulled herself up, her buckskin moccasins finding no purchase on the smooth wall. She paused, balanced precariously, and then slid through the opening, landing in a silent crouch on the floor inside. The room was dark, but moonlight streamed through the window she had just entered. It smelled of Silas, cigar smoke, bay rum, and old leather. Her stomach turned. She moved to the desk. She could see the silhouette of the heavy steel lockbox. It was fastened. She looked around, frantic. There was no key. She found a heavy brass letter opener on the desk, shaped like a cavalry saber. She wedged it into the seam of the box and pushed. Her hands were slick with sweat. The metal groaned. Outside, the corporal looked up from his conversation with Doyle. "What was that?" "Sergeant." "What was what?" Doyle asked. "That sound, from the captain's office." Before Doyle could answer, a sharp clatter echoed from the far side of the parade ground. Near the stables, a harness, left hanging on a peg, had fallen to the hard-packed earth. The corporal spun, his rifle coming up. "Who is there?" Doyle put his hand on the man's shoulder. "Relax, Corporal. It is just the wind. Or a raccoon. I will check it. You stay here." The corporal nodded, his suspicion diverted. High above, on the stable roof, Kohana did not move. He had nudged the harness off its hook with his foot. He flattened himself against the shingles, dust and old blood from the canyon fight caking his skin. He was exposed, but he was patient. Inside, Lena put all her weight on the letter opener. The cheap lock snapped. She ripped the lid open. Her heart sang. It was all there. A slim leather ledger, a packet of letters bound in ribbon, bearing the emblem of the Great Western Rail, and a single sheet of paper with a list of names, the outlaws. She recognized the name of the man who had grabbed her in the canyon. She shoved the papers deep into the front of her buckskin dress, the stiff paper scratching her skin. She moved back to the window. She had just put one leg out when a voice, cold and amused, stopped her. "Looking for something? Lena?" Silas Reed stood in the doorway, a single candle in his hand. His face was half in shadow, his eyes gleaming. He had not yet put on his uniform coat. Lena froze. She was trapped. Doyle, hearing the voice, moved fast. He rounded the corner, his face a mask of professional concern. "Captain, sir, I apologize for the disturbance." "I found Miss Hart. She was wandering by the wall, confused and terrified." "I was just bringing her in." Silas looked at Doyle, then at Lena, one leg still hooked over the windowsill. He smiled, a thin, ugly expression. "Wandering, I see, through my locked window. Sergeant, while you just happened to be here," his gaze was ice, "your behavior, Sergeant Doyle, is highly irregular." "Sir," Doyle said, "she is clearly not in her right mind. The savages—" "Silence," Silas commanded. He set the candle on the desk. He saw the broken lockbox. His face, for the first time, lost its calm. It twisted into a mask of pure rage. "You—" He advanced on Lena. "What did you take—" He lunged for her. Doyle stepped between them. "Captain, stand down." "Arrest this man," Silas roared to the corporal. "Arrest Sergeant Doyle for insubordination and treason." 2 guards came running. They seized Doyle, who did not resist. He had failed. "Confine him to the stockade," Silas spat. "He will be court-martialed or shot." He looked at the guards. "We move out at dawn. Full mobilization. We will wipe that canyon clean." He turned back to Lena, his smile returning. "As for you, my dear, you and I will have a long talk. You will tell me exactly who helped you." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "And you will give me what you have stolen." He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh. A sound, like a whip crack, split the night. The large oil lamp hanging over the office veranda exploded in a shower of glass and fire. "Fire!" the corporal yelled. In the sudden, blinding flash of light and total darkness, Silas was knocked aside. Lena was pulled backward, hard. An arm like a steel band wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet. "Run!" Kohana's voice was a growl in her ear. He had dropped from the roof. He landed, grabbed her, and pushed her toward the alley. "Stop them!" Silas bellowed, scrambling to his feet, pulling his revolver. "The savage has her! He is in the fort! Shoot them!" Rifle shots cracked. Bullets screamed past Lena's head. They ran, Kohana pulling her, his speed inhuman. They fled the fort, not through the gate, but over a low section of the adobe wall near the smithy. They dropped into the darkness and ran for the open scrubland. Shouts erupted behind them. Mounted patrol after them. They could hear the thunder of hoofs, the jangling of sabers. They ran until Lena's lungs were on fire. The moon was bright, too bright. They were exposed. "This way!" Kohana yelled. He veered right, toward a deep ravine. A dry wash cut into the earth. "They will not follow us here." "They are right behind us!" Lena cried. "Jump!" he commanded. He did not wait. He seized her hand and pulled her over the edge. They fell, sliding and tumbling down a steep bank of loose scree and rock, landing hard at the bottom. Lena cried out as her knee struck a stone. Kohana pulled her up. "Quiet! Come!" He pulled her along the dry riverbed, into the deep shadows. She heard it then, the sound of water. He pulled her through a curtain of thick brush and behind a thin, cascading waterfall that dropped from a spring high above. Behind the water was a small, black cave. They pressed themselves into the cold, damp darkness. The roar of the water filled their ears. They were both soaked, the spray from the cascade instantly chilling them to the bone. Moments later, the cavalry patrol thundered past the top of the ravine. They could hear the horses, the men cursing. The sound faded. They were safe. The adrenaline vanished, leaving only the cold. Lena began to shake, her teeth chattering so hard it hurt her jaw. The desert night was frigid, and their wet clothes were a sheet of ice. "We must get warm," Kohana said. His voice was grim. "Or the cold will kill us before the soldiers can." I cannot stop shaking," she chattered. "Your clothes," he said. His voice was low, practical. "They are wet. You must take them off." Lena's mind, which had been sharp and clear during the escape, simply stopped. She was a proper woman from Boston. She was a virgin, and she was in a dark cave, soaked, with a man she barely knew, a man who made her feel things she did not understand. I cannot," she whispered. "You will freeze. Lena," he said. His voice was not impatient. It was a fact. She tried to unfasten the leather ties of the buckskin dress, but her fingers were numb. Useless. She was shaking too hard. He moved. His shadow blocked the faint light from the waterfall. She felt his hands, hard and calloused, find the ties at her neck. He did not fumble. His movements were sure, practical. He untied the laces. His fingers brushed the skin of her throat, and a different kind of shiver went through her, one that had nothing to do with the cold. Her breath hitched. Her heart, which had been pounding from the run, now pounded with a new, terrifying rhythm. She was afraid of the dark, of Silas, of the cold, and she was desperately afraid of this. As he pulled the heavy, wet dress from her shoulders, she crossed her arms over her thin chemise. She was trembling, naked in the dark, and vulnerable. She whispered, her voice so low it was almost lost in the sound of the water. It was half a prayer, half a terrified joke. "Don't make me scream!" His hand stopped. He was kneeling in front of her. He understood. He understood she was not just talking about the soldiers. He put his hands on her bare shoulders. His skin was warm. The contact was a shock, a sudden, searing point of heat in the frozen dark. He leaned closer. She could feel his breath. "You'll scream sweet," he said, his voice a low, rough murmur that vibrated through her. "But not from pain, from being free. I will not touch you if you do not want it." He held her gaze, though he could barely see her. "But if you choose me, Lena Hart, I choose you. Forever." It was a vow. It was the commitment she had been running from her entire life, and the only one she had ever wanted. He was not Silas. He was Kohana, who offered, who saw her. The terror of the chase, the fear of Silas, the ice in her veins. It all melted under the heat of his promise. She was done being safe. She was done being the person she was supposed to be. "I am so scared," she whispered, her voice breaking. She put her freezing hands on his face. "But I am more scared of losing you." She leaned in and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was the taste of river water and dust and survival. He kissed her back, his mouth hard and sure, and all the cold in the world vanished. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her, and she clung to him. He untied the dry buffalo robe from his back and, with one arm, wrapped it around them both, pulling them into a cocoon of shared warmth. The sound of the water roared. His arms were iron. Her hands were in his hair. His mouth was on her throat. And then the darkness and the warmth covered everything. When Lena awoke, it was to the gray light of dawn, filtered through the curtain of falling water. She was warm. She was wrapped tightly in the buffalo robe. Her body pressed against Kohana's. She was tucked against his chest, her head resting on his shoulder. She blushed, a hot wave of shame and memory. He was awake, watching her. His expression was not one of conquest. It was not the look of a captor. It was quiet, steady, and fierce. It was the look of a man who has found something he thought was lost. He saw her watching him, and he did not smile. He simply reached out and touched her hair, his fingers gentle. "From now on," he said, his voice low and certain in the morning quiet. "In any world, I am your home." The thin gray dawn was cold, a stark contrast to the heat they had shared. They climbed from the ravine, their bodies stiff, the reality of their world crashing back in. Kohana's promise, "I am your home," echoed in Lena's heart, a single point of warmth in the terrifying day ahead. They moved with a new urgency, not as guard and prisoner, but as two parts of a single purpose. They slipped back into Spirit Canyon just as the sun's first rays struck the high cliffs, painting them the color of fresh blood. The village was awake, the tension a low thrumming in the air. Raven Eye watched them approach. She looked at Lena, then at Kohana, and a deep, slow understanding passed over her features. She nodded once, a gesture of acceptance that went beyond words. "We have them," Lena said, her voice hoarse, pulling the packet of papers from her dress. They were damp, but intact. "The proof!" Kohana did not hesitate. He gave the papers to his youngest, fastest scout. "Miguel," he said, "ride as if the spirits themselves are chasing you. Do not stop. Do not be seen." The young man tucked the papers into his breechcloth and vanished, melting into the rocks. The race had begun. They had perhaps an hour. Justice was now a horse, racing against an army. The first sound was not a rifle. It was a deep, hollow boom that echoed from the canyon mouth, a sound that shook the stones under their feet. A moment later, a high, thin whistle. A shell from the howitzer screamed overhead and exploded against the high canyon wall. Far above the village, it was a ranging shot. "He has begun," Kohana said. His face was granite. He was no longer the man from the cave. He was a war leader. "They are coming." He turned to his warriors. "To the high ground, you know the plan. Taza." Taza, his eyes bright with a terrible fire, met Kohana's gaze. "You wanted this fight," Kohana said, his voice hard. "Now you have it. But you fight for them." He pointed to the caves where the women and children were being hidden. "You do not fight for glory. You fight for time. You slow them. You bleed them. But you do not charge. You make the talking wire speak for us." Taza, for the first time, did not argue. He looked at Kohana with a new, grudging respect. He nodded, a sharp, violent motion. "For time," he said, and he was gone, leading his warriors to the cliffs. The battle for Spirit Canyon began. The soldiers advanced in a neat blue line, their rifles at the ready. They were confident, moving into the canyon as if it were an empty stage. It was not empty. The canyon, which had seemed so silent, came alive. A single rifle shot cracked from the high rocks. A soldier at the front of the line crumpled, then another. The blue line broke. The soldiers scrambled for cover, firing wildly at the cliffs, their bullets ricocheting with angry, useless whines. Taza gave the signal. A low rumble grew into a terrifying roar. The warriors above pushed the keystones, and a river of rock and boulders, prepared for this very moment, cascaded down the canyon wall. It did not hit the soldiers. It landed just in front of them, blocking the main pass, creating an impassable wall of stone. The advance was halted. Lena had found her own battleground. She was the doctor's daughter. She had set up a makeshift hospital in the deepest of the caves, protected by the overhang. She had ripped her remaining petticoats and skirt into bandages. She had boiled water. She was ready. The first casualty was brought to her, a young warrior, his legs shattered by a ricochet. He was trying not to scream. Lena, her hands surprisingly steady, examined the wound. She looked at the boy, whose face was beaded with sweat, and she put her hand on his shoulder. "I will help you," she said. She worked, cleaning the wound, setting the bone as he bit down on a leather strap, binding it tight. She was no longer the trembling woman from Boston. The howitzer fired again. This time the shell was closer. It exploded on a ledge, sending shrapnel flying. She heard a scream. She looked out from the cave. Below, the soldiers were trying to find a new path. They were young. Their faces were not full of hate. They were pale and terrified. Boys caught in a lie. She could not stay hidden. Kohana was on the ridge above, directing the defense. Lena ran from the cave, climbing onto a low, exposed ledge. "Lena, no!" Kohana roared, but she ignored him. She cupped her hands to her mouth, her voice echoing in the sudden lull. "Soldiers, listen to me. My name is Lena Hart. I am not a prisoner." A few men looked up. "It is the woman. Captain Reed is lying to you," she cried, her voice desperate. "He is paid by the Great Western Rail. He hired men to attack us. This is a lie. Sergeant Doyle knows the truth." A rifle flashed. A bullet chipped the rock, stinging her face with stone dust. "Fire at will," an officer bellowed. "The savage has made her one of them." Kohana leapt down, tackling her, pulling her back into the safety of the cave just as a volley of shots ripped through the air where she had stood. "They will not listen," he panted, his face furious. "I had to try," she cried, pushing him away. "They are just boys. He's using them to die for his money." At that moment, a rider appeared, racing from the canyon mouth, waving a white cloth. He was a cavalry messenger. The firing stopped. He found Silas Reed, his face black with soot and fury. The man handed Silas a folded slip of paper. It was a telegraph, relayed from the signal station. Silas read it. His face went white. It was from Tucson. "Cease all hostilities. Stand down. Await full investigation." Doyle's testimony received Commander Tucson. Miguel had done it. The talking wire had spoken. Silas looked at the paper. He had lost. The railroad would deny him. His career was over. He would be court-martialed. He looked up the canyon, to the cave where he knew Lena was hiding. He crumpled the paper. "The savages are in full retreat," he lied to his lieutenant. "The main force is broken. I am taking a small team, 20 of my best men, up that side gully. We will flank their caves and rescue Miss Hart." The lieutenant, seeing the order from Tucson, looked confused. "But, sir, the command is to secure the hostage." "Lieutenant!" Silas snapped. "I am going to get her." He handpicked his men, the ones loyal to him, the ones who had been with him the longest. This was not a flanking maneuver. It was an execution squad. He had to kill the witnesses, all of them, from a ridge a mile away. Another man watched. Sergeant Tom Doyle. He was free. During the chaos at the fort, the fire and the explosions, he had escaped the stockade. He had found a horse and he had followed the column, staying hidden. He had seen the messenger. He had seen Silas read the note. And now he saw Silas take a small team, assassins, up the side path. Doyle spurred his horse. He knew this path. It led to the caves. He had to stop him. Silas and his men moved fast. Climbing the narrow goat path, they were met on a high, narrow ledge. not much wider than a horse. Kohana was there, with Taza and 5 other warriors. They stood, blocking the path. "Read!" Kohana yelled. Silas stopped, a cruel smile on his face. He saw Kohana, and behind him, Lena, who had come out of the cave. Well, the whole filthy family. Give her to me. Savage! "This ends here," Kohana said. "It does," Silas agreed. He raised his voice for his men. "He has poisoned her mind, turned her into a savage whore. She is a disgrace to her race. We are here to cleanse this place." "You are the only filth here," Taza snarled, lifting his rifle. Kohana put a hand on his chest. "No." He remembered Raven Eye's words. "Do not let him decide who you are." "She is my property," Silas said, taking a step forward. "She was mine in Boston, and she is mine here." "I am no one's property," Lena cried, stepping forward. "Shoot that traitor." The voice was not Kohana's, it was Doyle's. He had climbed up from below, his pistol out. "He is lying. Men, the order from Tucson is to stand down. He is a traitor, paid by the railroad." "Shoot him," Silas screamed. One of his loyal men spun and fired. The bullet struck Doyle in the chest. He staggered, fired his own pistol wide, and collapsed. The shot broke the standoff. Taza screamed in rage and opened fire. The ledge, barely 10 feet wide, exploded into a close, brutal firefight. Men were screaming, falling. Silas ignored it all. He drew his saber and lunged at Kohana. Kohana met the charge with only his knife. It was a desperate, primal fight. The long steel of the saber against the short, quick blade. They crashed against the cliff wall. Kohana bleeding from a gash on his arm. Lena, seeing Doyle fall, ran to him. He was breathing, blood bubbling on his lips. "The papers!" he gasped. Silas saw her. He shoved Kohana back and raised his revolver. "If I cannot have you, no one will." He aimed at Lena. Kohana tackled him. The world dissolved. They went down, rolling, struggling for the gun. Inches from the sheer drop. The fighting stopped. The few remaining soldiers on both sides stood, panting, watching their leaders. They had heard Doyle. They saw their captain, his face a mask of purple rage, fighting to kill. Lena stood up, her hands covered in Doyle's blood. "Stop!" she screamed at the soldiers. "Look at him. He lied to you. He is a traitor. Are you going to die for his greed?" The soldiers looked at each other. They lowered their rifles. The spell was broken. Kohana twisted the revolver from Silas's hand. It clattered, spinning, and flew out over the edge. Silas was disarmed. Kohana had him pinned. He let him go, standing up, his chest heaving. Silas scrambled to his feet. He was on the very brink. His face was a map of his own ruin. He looked at Lena. He looked at his men, who were just watching him, their faces cold. He had nothing. With a final animal scream, he lunged, not at Kohana. He lunged for Lena. Kohana moved to block him, but Silas was already off balance. His lunge was wild. His boot heel found only empty air. He teetered for one terrible, silent moment. His fingers clawed at the rock. Kohana reached out, his hand open, a reflex. Silas snarled. He tried to pull a knife from his boot. One last act of spite. The movement was his end. He lost his balance completely. He fell. His scream was thin in the vast canyon. It echoed, once, twice, then a final, sickening sound from the rocks far below. Silence. It was not an execution. It was a judgment, delivered by the land itself. Into the silence came a new sound, the thunder of many horses, a full company of cavalry, riding hard into the canyon. They were not Reed's men. Their uniforms were clean. A major dismounted. He saw the bodies. He saw the wounded Sergeant Doyle. He saw the armed Apache and Lena, standing over the wounded soldier, her face streaked with blood and powder. "In God's name," the major said. "What has happened here?" Lena did not weep. She pointed to the body far below. "That," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "is what happens when a captain breaks his oath. Major," a man in a civilian suit, a reporter from Tucson, stepped from behind the major, scribbling frantically in his notepad. The massacre was over. The investigation had begun. The quiet that fell on Spirit Canyon was heavier than the battle had been. It was the silence of accounting, of breathing in the new, hard shape of the world. The surviving soldiers of Silas Reed's renegade platoon were disarmed and marched down to the canyon mouth, their faces a mixture of shame and numb relief. Major Wallace, the man from Tucson, was professional and cold. He was here to clean up a mess, and his eyes showed he considered Silas Reed, the Apache, and the Great Western Rail to be all part of it. But the first duty was to the dead. The Apache did not weep loudly. Their grief was a physical thing, a deep, silent ache that settled over the village. They had lost 4 in the final battle, 2 older warriors, and 2 of the young, hot-blooded men who had followed Taza. Taza himself was among them. He had died on the high ledge, shot through the throat while charging a soldier, a final, defiant act. They held the funeral that evening, as the sun's last light turned the high cliffs to a deep, bruised purple. It was not a ceremony for outsiders, but no one told Lena to leave. She stood in the circle, her hands still stained with Tom Doyle's blood. The bodies were wrapped in their best blankets and placed on a high scaffold. The women began a low, humming chant, a song that was not about glory, but about the long, hard journey of the spirit. Raven Eye lit a small fire of sacred herbs, the smoke rising in a single, straight column into the twilight. Kohana stood apart, his face like carved stone. He watched the smoke, his heart heavy. Taza's death was a waste. A fire burned out too fast, and Kohana knew the boy had died the death he himself had barely avoided. Lena watched, and she felt a connection to these people that she had never felt to her own. She was not an observer. She was part of this loss. She had helped buy this victory, and she saw its terrible price. She was standing in the circle, a white woman in a borrowed buckskin dress, mourning a young Apache warrior she had barely known, and it felt more real than any church service she had ever attended in Boston. Sergeant Tom Doyle did not die. The army surgeon, a brisk man with tired eyes, had worked on him in the cave, with Lena holding the lamp. The bullet had missed his heart, but it had torn through his left lung and lodged itself against his spine. "He will live," the surgeon told Lena, wiping his instruments. "He is a lucky man, or an unlucky one, depending on your view. He will not be riding a horse again. He will not be a soldier. He will be discharged as soon as he is well enough to travel." Lena sat with Doyle as he drifted in and out of a laudanum sleep. His face was pale, but the tension was gone. When he finally opened his eyes and saw her, he managed a weak, lopsided smile. Did we stop him, Miss Hart?" he rasped. "Yes, Sergeant," she said, her voice thick. "We stopped him." "Good," Doyle whispered. He closed his eyes. "My father, he always said, a man's pay is not what is in his pocket. It is what he can live with. I can live with this." His career was over, but his conscience was, for the first time in 20 years, clear. He had made his choice, and he was at peace. The negotiations began the next day. A large parley tent was pitched at the mouth of the canyon, a neutral ground between the army camp and the Apache village. The air was thick with mistrust. The players sat on hard-camped chairs. Major Wallace, representing the United States Army, a thin, pale man in a black suit, who had arrived with the reporter. He was Mr. Harlan, a lawyer for the Great Western Rail, and Kohana, his face grim, with the Raven Eye at his side. Lena sat between them, her role as interpreter now formalized. Mr. Harlan was furious, but he was a practical man. The scandal was enormous. The Tucson reporter had already telegraphed the story. Army captain in league with railroad, incites Apache war for profit. Silas Reed was the perfect scapegoat. "Captain Reed," Harlan began, his voice clipping the words, "was a rogue agent. The Great Western Rail had no knowledge of his illegal, immoral methods. We deplore his actions." Kohana spoke, his voice low, and Lena translated, "You lie. Your surveyors were on our land. Your money was in his pocket. We will, of course, make a full reparation for the misunderstanding, Harlan said, ignoring the accusation. We are prepared to offer a generous sum to the tribe for their troubles, and to ensure the railroad can proceed. We do not want your money, Kohana said. We want our land. The Iron Snake will not cross Spirit Canyon. Harlan's eye twitched. The railroad is an inevitability. Sir, it is the artery of the nation. It will proceed. Then we will cut it, Kohana said. This will not end. Gentlemen, Major Wallace cut in, his voice heavy with authority. What is done is done. Captain Reed will be tried. In absentia, the Army's honor will be satisfied. Mr. Harlan, your railroad is a private enterprise, but it is acting with government sanction. And you, sir, he looked at Kohana, are on United States territory. There will be a compromise. It was Raven Eye who spoke then, her voice dry as the desert wind. Lena translated. The earth does not compromise. You cannot cut a woman in half and say it is a compromise. Spirit Canyon is the mother. It is where our spirits are born. You cannot have it. The standoff lasted for hours. The reporter took notes. Finally, Harlan, seeing his schedule and profits vanishing, made his last offer. It will cost us millions, he hissed. But the scandal? Fine. The railroad will be rerouted. We will blast through the northern mesas. It will take another year. It will cost a fortune. But we will go around Spirit Canyon. It was a victory, a stunning, impossible victory. And the land Kohana pressed. Major Wallace looked at his maps. The official designation of San Carlos will be amended. The tribe, he gestured to Kohana, will be given stewardship of the lands defined by these ridges. It will be their reservation. But it will be this land, Spirit Canyon. It was still a cage, Lena thought, but it was a cage of their own choosing, a cage with a soul. Kohana looked at Raven Eye, who nodded. It was done. In the weeks that followed, the world shifted. Redemption changed. The story of the siege, of the corrupt captain and the Apache schoolmistress had spread. Miguel Alvarez's cantina became the new center of the world. The Army, under Major Wallace's command, set up a permanent, smaller post, not to fight the Apache, but to watch the railroad. Soldiers, now wary and respectful, drank coffee at one table, while Apache scouts, led by Kohana, came in to buy flour and salt at another. Miguel, caught in the middle, had never been richer. He was the symbol of a new, fractured peace, a West where the lines were blurred. For Lena, the final, hardest choice remained. Major Wallace had offered her safe passage. Miss Hart, he had said, standing by her makeshift school in the canyon, where she was teaching Apache children their letters in the dirt. The town council has formally reoffered you the position of schoolteacher. The building is repaired. The church has sent a new minister. You will be protected. You will have a fine, respectable life. The life you came here for. It was a lifeline. It was the promise of everything she had once craved: safety, books, clean sheets, and a purpose. A world where she was not a savage's woman, but Miss Hart, the respected teacher. She went to Raven Eye, her heart a tangled knot. The old woman was weaving a basket, her fingers moving in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. They want me to go back, Lena said, sitting on the earth. To the town, to be a teacher. Raven Eye did not look up from her work. You are a teacher here. But I am. I am white, Lena said, the words feeling foolish on her tongue. I do not belong. The old woman's fingers stopped. She looked at Lena, her eyes clear and sharp. The wind does not ask what color the stone is before it whispers to it. The stream does not ask what blood the horse has before it gives it water. You were born of one people. You were reborn in this canyon. Freedom, little one, does not come from the blood you have. It comes from where you choose to stand when the land is torn in two. Lena knew, but there was one last fear. She found Kohana that evening. He was on the high ridge, watching the sunset. He did not turn when she approached. They stood together, watching the sky bleed out. The major offered me the job, she said quietly. In the town, Kohana remained still. It is a good job. It is a safe life. It is what you wanted. Her heart ached. His voice was distant. Was the night in the cave? The promise, just a thing of the battle. A dream. Is that what you want me to do? She asked, her voice small. He turned to face her. His expression was impossible to read in the dimming light. He took her hands. They were rough now, calloused from the grinding stone. What I want, he said, his voice low and rough, does not matter. What matters is your choice. But I chose you, she whispered. In the cave, I chose you. You chose to live, he said. We chose to survive. That was in the dark. Now it is the light. I will not be another man who owns you. Lena, not Silas, and not me. My love is not a chain. If I hold you here, if I ask you to stay, you will always wonder about the other life. You will always be a captive, even of love. And love cannot breathe in a cage. He let go of her hands. The choice must be yours. You are free. You can go. This was the final test. He was giving her the one thing no one else ever had: a true, unconditional freedom. To choose him would mean choosing his world. The hardship, the judgment, the life between two worlds. To leave him would be to tear her own heart out. But it would be safe. She stood there, on the edge of the world, torn. She looked away from him, out past the canyon, in the far distance, miles away. She could see the tiny glint of the railroad surveyor's new camp. She heard the faint, thin sound of a hammer on steel, a high, sharp tink, tink, tink. It was the sound of the old world, the sound of progress, the sound of noise and smoke and contracts. Then she looked back, down into the heart of Spirit Canyon. The wickiups were dark shapes. A few fires glowed like captured stars. She heard the soft, rushing sound of the stream, the nicker of a pony. She heard a child laugh. She thought of the girl in the black dress who had arrived in redemption, so desperate for a quiet, respectable life. She thought of the woman standing here now, in moccasins, with a man who had promised her nothing but a home in his own heart. Her choice was made. Her heart, which had been leaning, finally settled. She knew where she belonged. 10 months passed. The high, hard winds of winter scoured the canyon, and the spring that followed brought a sense of quiet change. Spirit Canyon was no longer just a hidden refuge. It was a place being built. The old, scattered wickiups were still there, but among them, set back against the protective rock, were 3 new structures. They were not the squared, rigid boxes of the white man, nor were they the simple brush shelters of the Apache. They were a hybrid, built of solid logs but with rounded, wind-smart shapes. They were the first structures of a new world. The sound of children's laughter, which had once been a fearful, quiet thing, now echoed off the high walls, clear and bright, mixing with the sound of the stream. Lena had stayed. She had never given Major Wallace an answer. She had simply let him ride away, and she had turned back to the village, picked up a grinding stone, and continued her work. Her choice was made in that quiet, daily action. She was the teacher. Her simple buckskin dress was now supplemented by a durable cloth skirt and a linen shirt, ordered from a catalog that came on the train. Her hair was still in 2 tight braids. She moved with a purpose she had never known, her skin browned by the sun. In the mornings, she taught the Apache children. They sat on blankets in the shade of a cottonwood, and she drew letters on a slate board, but she was also a student. In the afternoons, the children taught her. They taught her the true names of the plants, the stories of the coyote, and how to read the clouds. She was learning to paint their symbols onto cured hides, the stories of the sky next to the letters of the English alphabet. Kohana was a leader, though he held no title. He was simply the one they turned to. His rage, the fire that had burned in him since the Gila River, had not been extinguished, but it had been banked. It was a fuel now, not a wildfire. He still hunted. He still led the patrols that watched the canyon rims, but he also rode into redemption twice a month. He was the one who spoke for the people. He negotiated with the new, nervous agent from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. He traded cured hides for flour, salt, and medicine. He was a bridge, a man who had not surrendered, but had chosen to engage. He represented a people who would not be isolated and would not be destroyed. The railroad, the great iron snake, had been forced to bend. Its route now ran a full 20 miles north, a long, expensive detour through the hard rock of the mesas. The sound of its whistle was faint, a thin cry on the wind. It was no longer a threat. It was, instead, a tool. It brought the mail. It brought the newspapers from Tucson, which Kohana now read himself. His brow furrowed as he deciphered the lies of the politicians. It brought a crate of books for Lena, sent from Boston by a concerned but confused relative. One afternoon, it brought a letter. It was from Tom Doyle. His handwriting was shaky, the hand of a man in constant pain. He had been honorably discharged with a small pension. He was living in Tucson, co-owner of a small tack and supply shop. "It is a quiet life," he wrote. "My lung aches when the wind blows, which is to say, it always aches. But it is a good, honest ache. I am not rich, but I sleep at night. I hear that you have remained in the high country. Miss Hart, I am not surprised. You have your father's spirit. He would be proud, not of where you are, but of who you are. If you or your husband ever find yourselves in Tucson, the coffee is on me." Lena folded the letter, a warm feeling in her chest. Your husband. The world had made its own assumptions, and, for once, the world was right. She and Kohana had never had a ceremony, not a white man's or an Apache's. Their vow had been made in the dark, in the cold, and it had been sealed in the fire of the battle that followed. It was a bond stronger than any piece of paper. The letter was a reminder. Not all soldiers were Silas Reed. Not all white men were blind. That evening, the air was cool, the sky a deep, star-filled purple. Lena found Kohana on their usual spot, the high ledge overlooking the canyon, the one where they had made their final choice. He was sitting, watching the shadows fill the canyon floor. She sat beside him, leaning her shoulder against his. They sat in a long, comfortable silence. "I got a letter from Sergeant Doyle today," she said, her voice soft. "The soldier with the honest ache." Kohana said he had read it. "He is a good man." "Yes," she said. She looked up at the spill of stars. "It made me think about that first night, the real first night, in the cave, by the waterfall." He turned to look at her, a small, rare smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I remember," she said, a small blush rising on her cheeks. "I was so cold and so scared. I said, 'Don't make me scream.'" His smile widened. He reached out, his hand warm as it covered hers. His palm was rough against the back of her hand. "And you did," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble. "When the battle was over, and you knew Sergeant Doyle would live, you sat by the fire, and you wept. You screamed for all of them, for Taza, for the soldiers. You screamed, Lena. But it was because you finally chose to be free." She turned her hand, lacing her fingers with his. The sharp, erotic memory of that night was still there, but it had softened. It had become something else. "Scream, sweet," she whispered. "You were right. It is not about pain. It is about feeling it all, not being quiet anymore." She was quiet for a long moment, gathering her courage. "Kohana," she said, her voice dropping. "There is something else." He waited. She took his hand and moved it from her own, placing it flat against her stomach, just below her ribs. I am with child." His hand, which had held weapons and guided horses, was suddenly completely still. He did not speak. His breath caught. She felt the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in his fingers. He looked at her, his eyes wide in the starlight, searching her face. He saw no fear there, only a deep, calm joy. A slow smile spread across his face, a true smile, one that reached his eyes, erasing the old scars, the weariness. "He, or she, will be a strong one," he whispered. "To be born in this place." "I am happy," Lena said, tears welling. "And I'm afraid. Not the old fear, but what will this world be for him? He will not be Apache. He will not be white. He will be in between. Like your father, Kohana said, his voice thick. Like us. He moved his hand, his touch infinitely gentle. He will not be in between. He will be a bridge. He will speak 2 languages. He will read the books. He nodded toward their cabin, and he will ride the wind. He will be a new people. Lena, the first one. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat. A new, shared future settling around them. We have to build it, she said. What? The school. Not just a blanket under a tree. A real school. A building with a roof on the edge of the canyon, where the trail meets the flat land. He looked at her, catching the fire in her voice. The army paid, she said. The reparations from the investigation. The money that Harlan paid. The blood money for Silas. We have not touched it. It sits with Miguel. Let us use it. Let us take that bad money and make it clean. We will build a school. For our children. Kohana agreed. No, she said, sitting up. For all of them. For the Apache children. For the children from Redemption. For the ranchers' sons. For the half-breed children in the town that no one will claim. We will build a place where they can all come. A place that belongs to no one. And to everyone. The plan took root. Miguel, thrilled, became the agent, ordering lumber and glass from the train. Raven Eye, seeing the wisdom in the bridge, blessed the ground, and Kohana, with his strongest men, began to build. 6 months later, the small log cabin stood finished. It was simple, solid, and beautiful. It smelled of fresh-cut pine and new hope. On the first day, Lena stood at the door. 5 Apache children came, and 3 white children from Redemption, their mothers looking nervous but determined. Miguel had brought his own young nephew, a Mexican boy with bright, curious eyes. Lena hung a simple wooden sign over the door. She had spent a week carving it. On one side, in clean English letters, and on the other, in the sharp, elegant symbols of the Apache, it said the same thing. This place belongs to those who will not bow. She rang a small brass bell. The children, hesitant at first, mixed, and then ran inside, their voices filling the small room. Lena stood by the door, watching them. She saw Kohana on the ridge, leading a string of ponies, the children from the village running at his side. He was teaching them, as he had taught her. She felt a peace so profound it was like the bedrock of the canyon itself. She thought of the girl from the east, the one who had come here seeking only to be left alone, the one whose only defense was to say, "I'll be good." A girl who promised to be quiet so the world would not hurt her. She was not that girl. She was not good. She was fierce. She was a mother. She was a teacher. She had chosen to live a hard, loud, decent life. She had chosen to love a warrior, and to love a land that knew how to scream. She put her hand on her swelling belly. "I'm home," she whispered to the wind. And the wind, whipping down from the high red cliffs of Spirit Canyon, wrapped around her, its voice a sigh of permanent, complete acceptance. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We have come a long way together through the dust and danger of the Arizona territory. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening to this tale from, please? Let us know in the comments below so we can share this experience together. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And to help this story reach more people, please press that hype button. Your support means the world to us.